Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom. The way you approach your divorce negotiations can either make or break your outcome. So today we're going to be talking about how you do it. And Mum, I keep getting it wrong, so can you say it?
I call it the iron fist in a velvet glove.
So today we're going to be talking to you about how to do your negotiations with an iron fist, but in a velvet glove.
That's
now,
right.
Before we get started, you've mentioned this in another episode about the DV swing.
Hello, Laura.
Oh, hi, Mum. Welcome. Thanks for coming. But let's get cracking.
Okay.
So you mentioned this in one of the domestic violence episodes where you talked about sometimes if someone's being so horrible to you, and you've put up with it for so long, when you finally get free and the pendulum swings the other way, you're not taking a bar of it.
Yeah.
So can you just explain why it's really important to maybe listen to this episode for people that you don't have to have been through DV, but where you've had the pips with your ex and you've had enough and you just want to get it sorted?
Yeah, so it's true. Like often a lot of people just keep the peace in their relationship because that's how you keep the marriage or relationship going. And then I find sometimes, and it is a known thing, that at the end of the marriage, they will come away, a person, particularly if they've been domestically abused and used to saying yes to everything, they'll come away quite timid. Then as time goes by and they get some perspective about what's been happening to them in the relationship, they go, well, excuse me, and they stand up for themselves probably for the first time in years. But then, unfortunately, they can tend to go a little bit too assertive too soon. I think assertive is great, but you don't want to be like that before you've settled your property settlement. So what we need people to be is not, to get your stuff done, to get your settlement. You don't want to be at the very beginning where you're weak and you just accept anything they say. But you don't also want to get to the point where you don't accept that even if they say today's Wednesday, you don't agree with it. So you've got to try and just keep a level head and put up with it for just that little bit longer.
Yeah.
So that you can get a settlement.
So today we're going to do 7 tips. 7 tips on how to approach your divorce negotiations with the iron fist in a velvet glove. I said
it.
Yay. But before we delve into those tips, you said a very important thing anyone listening today needs to know if they need to know what their end goal is.
That's right. You need to know where you stand. So we always say to people, go and see a lawyer at least once and get a rough idea of what you're aiming at, because how can you negotiate if you don't know what your entitlement is? And even if you think you're not going to fight for your full fairness, you're going to settle for something less to keep the peace, you still need to have a clear idea of what it is you're sacrificing in order to keep the peace so that you can set your goal in your mind and then negotiate appropriately.
Okay, so anybody who is listening, if you haven't found out what it is that you're fighting for, and I know a lot of people say percentages for property or time spent with their children are the main biggies, make sure you know what your end goal is before you start negotiations. Otherwise, you don't really know what you're negotiating and they can start leading you the way they want.
Or you won't know a good offer if it comes across the table.
Yeah.
And I say even more than that, after you've worked out the percentages for property split, turn that into an actual dollar figure. And where will that money come from? Is your, say you're getting $100,000. If there's a $200,000 pool and somehow you've decided 50-50 is right for you guys, so you're going to get $100,000, how are you going to get that? Because that $200,000 pool is a calculation of all the assets to be divided. So they might say to you, well, do you want your car? That's $26,000. You take that off the 100. So, and then you just work out what percentage you want of super, property, and cars, so you've got something to work on and what dollar value that looks like.
And you can do our course if you want to kind of figure that out yourself and then go get it checked by a lawyer, or you can listen to some more of our episodes or go and see a lawyer.
I think, I think seeing a lawyer, if you're not doing the course, I think you do need to see a lawyer because it's I don't think we're able to cover enough detail of everyone's situation.
In the podcast,
in a podcast.
Okay, all right. So, Mum, let's get down to these 7 tips. Okay. So everybody's leaning forwards if they're in their cars and they're slowing down with their scrubbing of the the shower, because we know
Yes.
lots of you are cleaning right now.
Yeah.
But number one, Mum, you say don't react.
Yeah, try not to be reactive.
Okay, explain that.
Okay, so throughout your relationships, there might be a trigger that someone says, the other party says, that makes you flare up, and you actually don't see reason very well for a little while after that. In a separation, I find that the other person will sometimes deliberately do those things. And when you're reacting and emotional, you're not following your path. You're being distracted off your path by them, and it's just wasted energy. And you need a cool head. So no matter what they say to you, don't, like, whatever offer they put, it could be insulting. It could be just a shocking misunderstanding of all of this work you've put in over the years.
Slap in the face.
It feels shocking that someone that you used to love could do this to you. But try not to react. They've either done it on purpose to hurt you, or it may have come through a lawyer who's drafted a letter in a formal way and hasn't really taken into account how to approach you. Because our people, our listeners won't do that.
No.
They won't write that sort of letter that makes someone react.
No, and we'll make that tip number 2 is if you are writing to them, try not to be too businesslike and insult them. And I guess really when it comes down to it, Mum, it's the different divorce personality types that we talk about all the time.
Yep.
Are you amicable?
Yes.
Are you high conflict? Are you manipulative, controlling, or are you dealing with avoidant? And if you write a business-like, scary lawyer letter to an amicable
You could ruin
ex, that might just be the end of your amicable divorce, and it might get nasty.
They may go and see a lawyer and they might start.
Well, they say lawyer up. I'm going to go lawyer up. She's lawyered up. I'm going to lawyer up.
Yeah.
So that is an inflaming of the negotiations.
Can be. Absolutely can be. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're saying that don't react, though, with tip number 1, with manipulative, controlling and high conflict,
They love
that would be really hard to not react.
Well, I guess what I mean is don't react in a way they can see it.
Right.
By all means, go
Scream
into the
into a
bathroom
pillow.
and have a tantrum, cry in the toilet. Do all of that, not in front of your kids. But the response they get will be deadpan response. So all of that stuff they were excited for you to read and get upset about, they'll think it didn't do anything. And if they're not getting fun out of it, they might stop.
Not do it anymore.
And that's right, because there's no reaction from you. So the worst thing you can do is show them a reaction to that.
Right. So don't show them your reaction.
Yeah, I know you're not human if you don't react.
Yes. Go and react
I've been there.
in a padded room.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so number 3, don't fall into old patterns when negotiating. So what do you mean by that?
Okay, so the fights that people have, like even in happy marriages, you have the occasional Barney. And there's often a general theme. There's often something that someone raises every single time.
Oh, yes. What about Christmas 1997 when you did XYZ?
Or you're always late for everything. What would you know? Or you never helped with the kids, or you this.
Yeah.
So be careful with those old allegations, because if you raise them, they're irrelevant, really. If you raise them in an insensitive way, then the other person is going to react the way they always have reacted. So this is a new dawn. We're talking about a future here. So try to leave those old patterns behind.
Because there's no future in it. There's no point solving those old ones.
No, and so somewhere between a business-like letter and a letter that's sort of dithery and apologetic is the perfect way of writing your letter.
So don't be dithery and apologetic.
Yeah, and it's the perfect way for you to conduct your negotiations, which is nothing like how you used to argue. Yeah. With them.
So is it sending a message, particularly if it's manipulative and controlling type, you're sending a message to them to say,
it doesn't work.
I'm not going into this roller coaster rodeo with you, that I'm going to stop this. This is a different situation. This is different
This
arguments.
is a different dynamic now.
Yeah.
We're out of that, and I'm out of that.
We're out of high school.
And I'm not going back to there.
This is uni.
And so that does send a message back to stop the shenanigans, really.
Okay, great tip. All right. Really easy to say, really hard to do, because there is actually a book. What is it called? Reinventing Your Life. I think I've mentioned it before, by Jeffrey E. Young and Janet S. Kolosko. They've both got PhDs. But this falling into the same patterns, apparently it happens a lot to people after they've broken up with their ex. They find a similar person like their ex and fall into exactly the same patterns.
Yeah.
So it is hard to just go, don't go into your old patterns. But I think go and see a psychologist.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
say, this is the fight we always used to have. Can you help me to get my head out of that pattern so I can move forward?
Yeah, I love it.
But so, yeah, if you're interested in that book, definitely have a look
that
at
helps,
it because it'll help you get out of that pattern.
Look, relationships are pattern central. And because you've lived together for so long, even if it's only a few years, that's a lot of mornings, afternoons and so forth.
Yeah.
So you each know each other very well.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to change your pattern.
Yes. Now, Mum, with an iron fist and a velvet glove, one of the things you say you really need to do in negotiations is have firm but respectful boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't, in any negotiations, I think, don't be businesslike in your speaking, but be firm in your speaking. And there are some things that they may say or do that you can tell them are inappropriate.
Yep.
And don't you do it back. And like you just said, Laura, this is not the fight we're having. This is not the space that our relationship is in. This season is for respectfully and in a business-like manner and sorting out our assets going forward.
I guess you could use the trick that sometimes I use with my kids. I can see you're upset right now. Some of the words you are saying are indicating to me that you're quite emotional. I'll talk to you later when you feel better.
Oh, be careful doing that to another grown adult.
Okay.
It could sound a tad patronising.
Okay.
What if I said that to you ever?
As an adult? Yeah, probably
You say,
not.
no, don't say that.
I'd go, fair enough. Call me back in a week. We don't really fight.
No.
But I guess if somebody is using horrible words, calling you terrible names, you just go, okay, I'm ending this discussion
that's
now.
exactly right.
Ending the discussion, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
And the beauty of it is you no longer live in the same house with them.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. You don't have to sleep in the same bed with them or have the same meal with them. So you actually can remove yourself from the space by simply hanging up or going home, going somewhere else. So, yeah,
if
it's
you're
lovely.
separated under one roof, that's a little bit trickier, but I think probably not get into too many negotiations while you're living together.
We often don't. We leave it, everything sort of limps along. And anyone
is really
who's living at home, I think it's the most terrible thing because most people, they don't wake up one morning and go, that's it, I'm leaving the relationship. There may be 6 to 7 weeks or more of terrible mornings where you gradually realise that you have to
working.
go.
Yeah.
And that period of gradually realising is generally recognised as the hardest part of the separation because you already start your grieving. But if you reach that realisation and you can't go, you're locked in that phase for a very long time. So we feel for you. I really do.
We've got 2 episodes on being separated under one roof.
Yes.
Because there are a few kind of ruly tips you give that can help, especially with separation date and getting child support and spousal maintenance. So
keeping safe.
I'll put those tips in the show notes for anybody who is still at home with their partner or ex-partner. Okay. Moving along, giving in for the end goal.
Yes. So again, this is if you've had toddlers, you know about this. So if you want something really badly, you may have to give in on some other point just to get the main goal. So I think of it as kind of the silver candlesticks argument where you might want to, someone else wants them and you go, fine, have them, who cares? You know, there might be a discussion about which car they have or who's going to pay the rego and all of that. Just think about all of that and think about, is it worth losing a deal over? And if they are just saying things to dig at you and prickle you, just try to push it down for a little bit longer and
Psychologists will all be cringing at Mum telling everyone to push their feelings down.
Just till you get your settlement and then let it rip. But, you know, you're really going to have to be strategic. And if you're not a sort of person who's a planner and a plotter, and God knows I'm not, then it comes very alien to you because it smacks of manipulating the other person.
Yeah.
But I think that it's in everybody's best interest to get an outcome. And if the other person can't do it without you giving in on this one point, or if they can't help themselves from being nasty about it and you can still rise above it and settle, and then that's the best thing. I think the best thing you can do in any mediation is try to be prepared to settle, not on the big stuff, but on the little stuff, and trying to be charitable and almost think politely of this person who's just made your life hell for the last 6 months. It's really hard.
There are going to be so many people rolling
it's
their
really,
eyes.
well,
But
lawyers do it all the time.
But I think it's really important that you're saying that, you know, and we've said this many times on many episodes, when you look at the end goal of getting a new life, drawing
free.
a line in
Yep.
the sand and going, that's it, we're done.
Yeah.
We've sorted it out. You get that, I get this. We're moving on. End of drama, because let's face it, it probably takes up half of your week dealing with all of this stuff.
And a
during that.
lot of brain space.
So if they want the other car and you really want the other car,
It's just a car.
but if it's if that's the only thing that's holding you back from finally ending it, maybe you could sell the car that you get and get a
something like
different
it.
one.
And remember, I know I always say this too, the furniture is all just secondhand, the
Yeah.
cars secondhand, and stuff is just stuff.
And I have found maybe, especially moving on into the future of your lives, think about in the future, do you really want the special credenza that's going to remind you of past arguments or problems that you've had in your relationship every time you look at it?
And is it seriously the only one in the world?
Yes.
And
yeah.
it's just stuff.
Which again is so easy for us to say
Yes.
to the people
but
that
we've
are going
been
through.
there. I've been there.
I've been there. So, okay.
I
all
tell
right.
my clients too, if they've had to move into a tinier house that's nothing like the mansion perhaps I used to live in. I had a lady once, and she moved into the rental, and I said to her, look, paint it white and hang some gingham curtains and embrace the minimalist country vibe. And she never left there. She stayed there. She said, I've decided to live here because I haven't got a mortgage. It's nice and cheap and I love it. We've got sunshine and a puppy. And
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I moved from a very big house into an apartment, but it was at the top. And so everyone called it Rapunzel's Tower. And everyone just referred it to as my summer palace and
Yes.
Rapunzel's summer palace. So, and it was a nice little getaway. And again, it's all temporary in that stage. So
Yeah.
thinking about approaching negotiations in divorce, let's go through the number 7 one is letting them think it's their idea.
yes.
So what is this what lawyers do? If you're separated or about to be and you need to get everything finalised and sorted but you don't know what to do next, or you're looking for a way to do your own divorce and settlement without spending thousands of dollars on lawyers, then you already know what you need to do, and that is to sign up and become a member of the DIY Divorce Blueprint. Empower, educate and equip yourself with the legal know-how and the tools you need to get divorced or de facto separated and finally settled. Work through this course at your own pace without feeling confused, lost, scared or overwhelmed of all the family law legal jargon and processes. Let us walk with you through this journey and show you a better way. The number 7 one is letting them think it's their idea.
Yes.
So what is this what lawyers do?
Well, a good lawyer will.
Okay, so
Yeah.
explain what that means.
Because when we're trying to negotiate on your behalf, right, the worst thing a lawyer can do is get angry with the other lawyer, and then the pair of them can just make your whole fight worse
ruin
than
it.
it was.
Yeah.
And you might as well just do the fighting yourself. So yes, lawyers do. We are respectful and professional and keep it polite. But sometimes the lawyers, not my lawyers, but the lawyers on the other side, not me, can have pretty big egos too. And so there's always an opportunity, and I think people should do it as well with their exes, to kind of plant a bit of a seed and then let them come back with the idea. You know, you may see it clear as day, oh, this is the way we should do it. What we ought to do really is I'll take half his super and he takes half the cash and then we're right. But wait until it's perhaps their idea.
if you've got manipulative controlling.
If you've got a manipulative, controlling or a high conflict person.
Yeah.
With the avoidant type person, again, you have to be very gentle with an avoidant person to get them to move along, but use inclusive language when you're talking to them, when you write to them. How about we do this? How about we do that? You know, and you can sort of rather than
tip.
dragging a person along.
I think our plan should be.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
No, not even I think.
No, oh yeah.
Do you think?
Do you think?
Our plan should be this or this. So you've got a toddler, you know, you don't want your 3-year-old toddler choosing their shoes for the day because they might pick gum boots.
They always pick
Pick gum boots. So you say, what do you think you'd like to wear, Tani? These shoes or these shoes? And then they'll pick.
And you don't give them the gumboot option at all.
The gumboots are out of sight, yeah. So that's the kind of thing you can do, like to try and take the heat out of it. It does sound like I'm being patronising, but humans are humans, you know.
Mum, there was a book in your bookcase that I read one day because I was completely bored, Mrs. Beaton's Guide to Being a Wife or something.
Oh, yes.
And in it literally said, always, never give your husband the idea of what you want. Make it them think it's their idea.
And
so
let them
it's not like it's not a new thing.
Well, that Mrs. Beaton book's over 120 years old.
Yeah, so there you go. So it's been happening for a long time.
Hang on, what were you doing with my antique books?
I don't know, I was bored. Okay, so I did miss one, Mum, and you kind of touched on it a little bit. But the biggest one I think maybe some people are having problems with is not letting your lawyer be too aggressive and creating a drama that maybe wasn't there in the first place.
Yeah, I think we did touch on it a little bit, but yes, you need to choose your lawyer wisely. So some people go to a lawyer and the lawyer will go, I'll watch me, I'll just nail this side to the wall, I'll slot them, this is this and this is it. And that's really about the lawyer's ego.
Yes.
It's not what you want. And your thing, and what we always say is, our job is to do for you what you would do if you had the training, and we're trying to give people the training and the education. But also our job is not to hammer the other side. It's to get you through in one piece, emotionally, financially, not run up your costs. So a reasonable letter from a lawyer will always get you far more results and quicker than someone who writes sarcastic letters. And you might read it and go, that told them. But really, it's just going to stir the other side up. And sometimes then the lawyers lose track that they're supposed to be helping to settle this for you. So
do you come across lawyers that become like a bit too gung-ho?
Yeah, there's some lawyers who I think are born like that. But do you know there's clients like that as well?
Okay.
And so sometimes you'll have a client.
Oh, they find each other.
They do. You'll have a client come to you and I have in the past had to say to someone, you sound like you need someone who's really going to go for the juggler. And that's probably not my style. But there's a lawyer down the street I know who does that, so we send them off there. It's not to say that we're not firm, and I be firm and hard when I have to be, and to get a point. But you cannot be doing this for the lawyer's egos.
And in your experience, the iron fist with the velvet glove works better.
Works best.
Well, isn't it that saying, honey?
You catch more flies with honey.
Yeah, you catch more flies with honey. Okay. So
I try to always be reasonable with my colleagues and try and think the best of them.
And I guess it must be so hard to be, if they've cheated on you or if they've left you or you're just completely over them, they just don't do anything, they're not helpful, or you've had huge fights and you're all angry, or you're just disappointed that it hasn't worked out. So all these emotions are running through your head. And then you've got to try and negotiate. So it no wonder it's a minefield, because negotiations and mediations and things like that all come down to everyone being reasonable and thinking logically and looking at the facts.
Absolutely. And so if you get two good lawyers, when their clients burr up and say sort of unfiltered things, the lawyer will tone that down in the correspondence. So they're kind of like filtering it through. Right. And for the people who are doing the course or listening to the podcast and who are acting for themselves, you don't have the lawyer to say, we won't say that. We'll just say this. Yeah. So you need to write your letter, leave it for a couple of days and then have another look at it. And we have that communications compass. Can you remember all of the letters? N for north, E for exact, so be precise.
No, N for nice.
Nice, sorry, north. So nice, and E for being exact. So don't put extra words in whatever you're writing. Make it short and to the point.
Yeah.
Okay. South is short. Keep it short. Yep. And north, south, east, west. Oh, without emotion.
Without emotion.
Yeah. We were struggling to find something for W.
I think you've got it wrong there, Ma. But
do you not think?
I think we've missed something because we've said exact and short twice. But
no, exact meant precise, and then keep it short. Yeah, keep it facts. Don't put adjectives in.
Yes,
it's not
creative
and
writing.
never say I've been incredibly angry. Just don't even say angry, but incredibly seems to stir people up and just kind of moderate everything down.
Okay. All right. So people listening today, everybody, again, as we always say, you're always in the negotiation phase, whether you're in court, whether you're in mediation, or whether it's a lead up to mediation, whether you failed at mediation, whether you're waiting to have your first court date,
or waiting for trial,
waiting for anything.
Yeah.
You're always in negotiation phase.
Until you get your judgment. So you can write a letter and offer a put
thing.
It without prejudice on the top if you're trying to put some proposals.
Yes, because you don't. What does without prejudice mean?
Without prejudice is the shorthand for without prejudice savers to costs, and that means that you are making this offer and it can't prejudice your case in court because the other person is not allowed to use this letter in court. They're not allowed to say to you in the witness box, hey, you said you made an offer last April that you would take, the caravan and the car and that would be it. And now you're saying you want half the house. They're not allowed to do that.
Great. So negotiations can be prior, if you're right, without prejudice.
And then you use that letter. The only reason you would use that letter, that is if at the end you get more than the caravan and the car, and you can say, Your Honour, we would have settled this last April because here's the offer I made and this person didn't accept it. Therefore, would you order costs against this person?
And costs means paying fees.
Pay some of your legal fees if you've had any.
Listen to the Costs and Calderbank offers. Calderbank offers.
I'll make a lawyer out of you.
No, you won't. Never. I refuse. You can listen to that episode. I'll put that in the show notes if that's something that you're up to. All right. So negotiating, we're always negotiating. Everyone has a chance to get off that court conveyor belt. Even if you're about to go to mediation, you can still try and negotiate, but you can't really negotiate, again, like we said, unless you know what it is that you want.
Yes.
So really make sure you know what you want by going to see someone.
Well, at least you know what you're giving up then if you do negotiate below.
So we're going to just go into a little bit more depth of the 4 personality types. But number 1, again, was don't react.
Yes.
Or hide your reaction.
Yes.
Number 2, don't let your lawyer become too aggressive or create more drama.
And sometimes a lawyer might inadvertently write a letter that's too businesslike and too legalistic and it gets the other person's back up, maybe because they don't understand it.
Yeah. Number 3, don't fall into the same patterns.
Yeah.
Number 4, firm but respectful boundaries. Number 5, don't try to be too businesslike if it's amicable. Number 6, giving in for the sake of the end goal to some things. You might just have to. Number 7, letting them think it's their idea. Anything else you want to add to that?
I think that's pretty good. I just think one thing I'd like to say to everyone is that if people go to court and you get a document from the other person that's got an application to the court and that these are the orders that your other person wants, at the bottom there's usually, and that the respondent pay the applicant's costs of and incidental to this application. And the number of people who ring me and they're hysterically panicking about that because how dare my ex say that or, And I just wanted to know for whoever it is out there who needs to hear this today, that lawyers just put that on the bottom of their orders automatically. I've never had a client instruct me to put costs on the bottom. We just do. It's a procedural thing. So be aware that some of the stuff that might be getting you upset is probably just lawyer writing, not particularly meanly. They just don't realise the impact that it might have. Yeah.
When did you realise the impact? When people kept ringing you in a panic?
Yeah, very early in my career, when I had one of my clients say, I've been served with papers and he wants me to pay costs.
and you're like, it's kind of like the equivalent of a fairy tale story and at the end it says the end and they lived happily ever after the end.
Yes.
So that's what, and they should pay their costs.
Yes, it is.
How often does it actually happen?
Well, the general theory in court or the legislation says that parties should generally pay their own costs in family law proceedings. So it is really only in extreme cases that costs might be awarded. So I don't know a percentage, to be honest, but if someone makes an offer, like we said, with an out prejudice offer, and they get that or better when it actually goes all the way to trial, the court is not slow in ordering costs there, some of the costs to be paid. You really do have to behave yourself in a court process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're not in the court process and you're negotiating,
You don't
still
have to
behave
pay
yourself.
costs. Yeah.
No, because all those letters do end up in affidavits and in front of judges. So just be aware everything you do or say may be used against you in a court of law.
Every text you write, there should be a song. Every text you write, every Facebook post may well find it being printed out and attached to an affidavit and being read out in court by a barrister.
Well, there is a saying. It says, "Dance like nobody's watching, but text and do social media like a judge is going to look at it."
That's a good idea.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes.
I'll embroider that and put it up.
But I think really the message we're trying to get home today for everybody is you're always negotiating, but the way that you negotiate can really make or break your potential of getting settled out of court, not going to court, and even sometimes avoiding mediation. If you guys can nut it out yourselves or just with lawyer letters, you can really save yourself a lot of money. And, our course does show you how to do that. If that's the way you want to go, then you can stay out of court. And negotiations, it really is the crux of everything. And I think a lot of people think, we just go to a lawyer and the lawyer does it all and then it's done. But the lawyer is just your facilitator.
That's right.
It is up to you.
Yeah, I agree.
They're not magicians. They can't just magic it to be finished.
And the tone of that first letter could spoil everything because they might be nursing a grudge over something you said back in the letter earlier on. So I think that having been partners makes the negotiations harder, not easier.
Yes. And perhaps maybe with that, don't react. If you do get a letter from the other side and they're not listening to these tips and they're just throwing fuel on the fire and it's getting crazy, just put it down. You don't have to respond straight away, do you, Mum?
No. And
unless there's like a deadline on it that actually has a consequence.
That actually has a proper deadline, yes.
Then you don't need to write back straight away. And I tell you right now, writing back straight away, if you leave it overnight and then look back at it later, go, I should probably not write that. I will rewrite it. And I think that happens for everyone.
Well, it happens for lawyers, our firm, particularly me. I have a policy. If there's a really fiery letter that I've dictated, I ask my secretary not to give it to me till the next day. And I usually go through and cross out a lot of words like very and disappointingly and
outrageous.
and if my letter starts with at the outset, I'm really upset. So we tone those letters down because who's that helping?
Yeah. So if you're doing it yourself and you don't have a secretary to hold your letter for a day, then maybe write it and then save it as a draft.
Absolutely. And promise yourself not to send it.
Don't send it till you've gone through it and rechecked it.
And to avoid sending it to the wrong person,
yes,
I put my own name in the two and save it as a draft. And then when I reopen it, only then do I put their name in, because we've had 2 matters in the last few weeks in my firm where someone's sent a letter and then frantically tried to recall it, not before we've seen it.
Oh, no.
Yes. So, yes.
Okay, so let's quickly go over the different types of personality types and talk about that negotiation approach. So, again, because if someone's come out of a manipulative, controlling situation, potentially DV, the last thing they want to do is be nice and give into anything.
No, absolutely.
Because how dare they?
Because it just feels like a continuation of the abuse.
Well, it feels like that. I think to a lot of them that they're just, they've left, but now they're back in it again.
In that again. Yep, I can get that. I get that.
So what do you say to them?
Well, it's just a little bit longer, and it's not really giving in if what the proposal is within the range. So you have to try and put a very business-like hat on and look at what it means in dollars and forget all of the insulting words and connotations. Just look what it means to you going forward. Forget how it looks to them.
Yeah. Could you think of it like this? If for an example, you could think of it like, well, if you were in a toxic workplace and you were desperate to get out, but you wanted to have a decent reference, instead of blowing up at them and telling them how crap they are and writing a really abusive letter, you hold it in, you're giving you 2 weeks notice, and you just stick it in there for those extra 2 weeks
and then go.
So that you can get a better job. But if you lose your mind in the job and you don't get a good reference, you might not get a better job. It's the same. It's similar.
Isn't it like my toddler story too?
Yes.
Why does a 2-year-old say tar? To make mummy let go of the biscuit.
Yes, not because the 2-year-old's wanting to be polite.
No, not at all.
No.
So it's the same thing. It's just like you just have to do the do.
I don't think people in other countries know that toddlers say tar. I think it's an Aussie thing. So tar means like please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all to our USA and UK or maybe UK probably be the same. But all the other countries, that's what mum means by tar.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I know it's really hard, but maybe you could have in your head like a superhero feeling of, yes, I've got my velvet glove on, but underneath is an iron fist. So even though, yes, you might have to give in to something, and yes, you have to be civil, and yes, you want to bite back, but you're not going to, just think of yourself as a controlled superhero.
That's right. And it doesn't matter if they think they're getting the better of you again.
Yeah.
Because you know deep down that you're playing them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yes, mother. Okay, next is amicable.
Yeah.
So negotiations with amicable.
Yep.
Any tips?
I think do those quickly while it's still amicable.
Yes.
But don't be tricked into thinking that just because it's amicable, it's in your interest, like that the other person isn't being a little bit self-interested. So you really do need to go and find out what your rights are.
Yeah.
But yes, and I hope for everyone that they can have an amicable separation, negotiate firmly but fairly, and come out with something they can both live with, and then that they're not carrying any legacy of disappointment or hatred or anything over that. If you're amicable at the beginning, try not to make it worse with the separation and with the negotiations. But still, remember the test for amicable. What happens if you say no to anything?
Yeah.
How amicable is it then? And if it's not amicable, or if it's only amicable because you're saying yes, then maybe they're manipulative.
I think maybe with the negotiations with amicable too, we get a lot of people writing in saying, oh, well, we just want to keep our own cars. He's got a new house. I've got a house. We just want to keep our own bank accounts. We want to keep our own super. So we don't need to negotiate anything. What do you say to those people?
They probably don't. They might not have to.
No, but do they need to do anything?
Well, they need to go and find out what their rights are.
But can they just walk away?
Well, some people, very rarely can you, because people are often on each other's mortgages or each other's houses.
But imagine if no one's thing is in anyone's name and it's all separate.
Well, then, as long as you don't go and win lotto or have a big inheritance windfall of some sort between the walking away and the 12 months after a divorce or 2 years after separation, then you're probably okay. Because one of the tests the court has to apply is it just and equitable to make any order at all? And I do occasionally find matters where it's so neatly divided already that people have really probably kept their money separate.
But
all
it's
you
a
do
risk.
then, it's what we do, though I always say, remembering Farmer and Bramley, I always say you need to write it down and get that court seal on it or do a binding agreement.
Well,
otherwise it's not over.
That's what I meant. So because we get a lot of people writing in saying, I don't need to do anything because he's got his money, I've got my money, we've got I've got a house in my name solely.
So get it written down.
But you have to have it written down.
Get it down and get an order. And the case that I mentioned, Farmer and Bramley, they separated. I think she had 4 little kids. He was really not very much of a father, really not a provider, had a heroin addiction, separated, and he won lotto about 18 months after they separated, and he had to give some of that to her.
Yeah. But if they'd had a consent order, then probably
he wouldn't
not.
have had anything. That's right.
Okay.
He wouldn't have to give her anything.
All right, and that leaves avoidant.
Yep. So avoidant is tricky, and the language is important with avoidant, but you're going to have to be persistent. And sometimes you need a legal letter to drum it into them that it is separated, that you are separated, but don't frighten them into doing nothing at all. So you have to be inclusive. And I'm thinking about this in your letters to your son. How about, what do you think about this as a plan? And if we do that, we could do that. What do you think? If I don't hear from you, I'll go ahead and keep moving on that path, that sort of thing, the way you do it. You're still sounding helpful and giving options, but you're inexorably moving yourself.
Yes.
And your agenda, I guess, to get separated along.
If you are avoidant, and I know some people are because they just don't want to face it.
Yeah.
If you're avoidant and the other person doesn't care, or they're avoidant too, and it's just this big mess for ages, and you don't do any negotiations, is there any problem with that?
Yeah, there can be.
Yeah.
Things can change, like values can go up, values can go down. People can lose their job, might not be able to get a mortgage anymore.
Time limit.
The time limits, of course,
for the court,
that we've talked about, divorce and de facto time limits. So there's a lot to be said, but you need to give yourself a little bit of grace. I think people need to be able to cope. Yeah. And if you can't, I think it's time to rally your strong friend and at least go and see a lawyer and find out where you stand.
Yeah. Yeah. Get your friend to book the lawyer if you can't even bring yourself to do that, and then just get them to take you, and that will make a big difference. And we forgot high conflict, Mum. So negotiations with high conflict. What a fun topic.
Yes. Don't answer every single thing they shot they fire over at you. So I think I would be writing back to them saying, if they write da-da-da-da-da, you just go, look, to this we say that, to this we say that, but don't even answer the ones that aren't relevant. They're really ones that just want to fight over nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Or you can sometimes give in on those little things, but not until the end. If you give in all the way along, then you'll find out they still want more and more to give in. So do your little bit of giving in with people at the end.
Right. That's a good tip. And always know what it is that you want at the end so that you make sure you're not giving in to something that you actually want.
Yep.
Now, thank you, Mum, for that.
You're welcome.
It is a weird topic, but I think it needed to be mentioned because when it comes down to negotiations, it all comes down to the person who's negotiating, not necessarily the lawyer, because you're the one who's got to respond and answer and agree or not agree.
Yeah,
and so
you do all the work.
So
you do all the work.
All of you out there, try and put your imaginary velvet glove on and imagine your hands turned to iron and get yourself through this divorce negotiation or de facto negotiation.
And keep generating options.
It'll be quicker.
Yeah, hopefully it will.
Hopefully. All right, thank you, Mum.
Thank you, Laura. Bye, everyone.
Bye. If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.